Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and today we are connecting with an old friend, someone who's been on our podcast before, but we love her, so we're connecting with her again. She's amazing, Bibi Lorenzetti. And if you don't know Bibi, she is a beautiful yoga practitioner, a mother. She's deeply connected to these practices of the heart, of bhakti, chanting, and she is the owner and head teacher of the Newburgh Shala in New York. Today we're talking to her about her yoga journey, her practice, how it's changed from being a single woman practicing in Mysore to being a new mother practicing through pregnancy, and now 3 years later, how again practice has changed for her. So if you're a practicing mother, an Ashtanga yoga mama, this is the episode for you. I think you're really going to resonate and love this conversation. We're talking about some of the struggles, really, that come up when you're a mom, some of the mom guilt, some of the shame, and then we pile it on with the shame and the guilt of practice as well, and feeling like I'm not enough, and when am I going to get it back, and all of the things. And offer some helpful solutions, some helpful approaches to reframing some of this negative dialogue that comes up in our minds as women, as mothers, as practitioners, especially, I feel. We can be really hard on ourselves. And so when is it time to shift and reframe how we're approaching practice? Also, that can be not just relaxing our effort in practice, but when is it time to turn the dial back up again and get back in and light the fire and really feel more passionate again about a physical practice? So lots to contemplate here, lots to get into, and I know you're just going to really enjoy this conversation. And if you're looking for maybe a slightly different way to approach your practice that's not so physically focused, we all go through these ebbs and flows of physical practice. It's nice to have another kind of practice, chanting, pranayama, meditation, where you can still connect to your spiritual center on a daily, regular basis, creating that sacred space for self-care each day, but not having to exert so much energy physically at times. And this is one of the benefits to diving into a pranayama practice, a breathwork practice. And I would love for you to do this with me. My Ancient Breathing 2.0 online course is open. It's a 6-week live program with me. You also get 6 modules, 2 bonus modules, and a ton of bonuses, including a 6-month membership to my Inner Circle community. I would love for you to jump in and join me in Ancient Breathing 2.0. We are starting next week, and this is just going to be a beautiful time of deepening your practice, whether you're a new mother or whether you've lost your physical practice, or even if you're deeply committed to your physical practice but want to go even deeper to the heart of yoga and into the more subtle energy aspects, using the breath to really regulate your nervous system and learn how to do that in a scientific way, in a way that's going to help heal your body and your mind. This is the program for you, and I can't wait to welcome you inside. So without further ado, let's jump into this gorgeous conversation with the ever beautiful Bibi Lorenzetti. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I'm here with Bibi Lorenzetti. Hi, Bibi.
Hi,
You forgot to
Harmony. Hi,
announce me
Russell.
again. Hi, Bibi. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Russell?
Good. It's good. I have to apologize. We have a couple of dogs. It is extremely cold here. It's
Like
minus,
minus 30 Fahrenheit almost.
Oh my
yeah, it's minus
gosh.
30 Fahrenheit, and it's bad. And the dogs did not get their walk, and they're a little rambunctious. So they're making some noise. So apologize to the listeners at home, but they're probably not any less annoying than having me on the show. So how are you?
I'm great. I don't have many complaints right now.
Oh, good. Well,
It's good
that's
to
it.
be back.
Podcast over.
Yeah.
Wait. Well, actually, how did you come to this feeling of resolution? We could do that.
I just,
We'll start at the
I
end.
just gave in. I just
Oh.
surrendered. Yeah.
I love it. Surrender.
Yeah. When you have a
What did
3-year-old, you have to just.
you surrendered to the 3-year-old?
I wish I didn't, but there's no other way around it.
Surrender to
So
love.
I forget. It's a boy child.
Yeah.
It's a masculine
The
child.
boy, and he's just arrived in the boy.
Yeah. You've
I don't know
heard
if it's testosterone or what it is.
it is.
But
Have you heard this expression MOBs? Have you heard about this?
Mm-mm.
It's a rare breed, and they're very different from other parents. MOBs are mothers of boys,
Mm,
and it
I like
changes
this.
you. It turns you into a very different kind of person.
Yeah, yeah. I think I feel that. Thank you for that. I think I'm gonna need a shirt.
You're gonna need the shirt. How's it going? I mean, we connected. This is our third time.
It is our third time.
Yeah. And we connected the first time before you were a mother, I think. Or
Yeah.
maybe you had just become a mother. I think it was before though.
I think it was pregnancy.
Yeah, I think you were pregnant. And then just after giving birth. And now 3 years later.
Yep.
And I mean, we kind of talked about your early practice years. We talked about then early pregnancy practice and what your focus was. And now, how's it going? What does practice look like?
Well, I was reflecting on our 3 meetings, and
Yeah.
I feel like each time I feel like I've felt like, oh yeah, I've arrived at this phase. I know what this phase is about. I got this.
Yeah.
I've embraced the change. I've arrived, and then now looking back at our conversations, I'm like, now I think it's nice because then finally you're like, I just don't know shit. And that's just going to be it for the rest of my life. Who am I? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
It's all you got, right?
It's funny, isn't it? How I think there's that saying, like the more you know, or the more expert you become, the more you realize how little you actually know or understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I feel like the practice, spiritual practice, yoga practice, you enter this yoga practice thinking like, oh, I'm doing this really spiritual thing. And you're like, really, you dive into India and you're like learning all the Sanskrit and
Excavating.
yeah, chanting mantras or whatever, right? You're doing all this. You're like, I'm getting so spiritual.
Yeah. And maybe you're in your 20s.
Yeah. You're like, if only my parents knew how to do this. And then life happens, right? Yeah. And then it's a whole, I don't know, recalibration maybe, or a deepening of the practice and recognizing that I think life itself is the spiritual practice, right?
100%. I feel that very deeply, even though I struggle with that too, because I feel like, and part of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you too is because of this, because I feel like I've kind of leaned into that a little too much since the last time we spoke of just the Krishna, the duty is here, and the karma yoga and whatever, and then it derails very fast, and you have to kind of, that's what I feel like, that's why community and good friendships are so important, right? And having teachers, because it's like you check in and you're like, hold on a second, is life really the only practice? Is there, and so it's like, I feel like it's such a fine balance of where you draw the line and how you navigate that line.
Yeah, and also it's different stages too. Different stages, different phases, different seasons, and some seasons maybe aren't for asana.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I feel like that's a real thing. Like, there's other types of physical practices you can do for your body, and it doesn't make you a less spiritual practitioner or less of a yoga practitioner.
Yeah.
And then there's other seasons where you're like, I really want to like challenge my body and stretch and build up this stamina and this practice and rebuild my body in a certain way,
Yeah.
And so then
I
maybe you
understand.
go again into it. But I don't know. I think there's wisdom in the fluctuation, actually.
Yeah.
Rather than necessarily needing it to be a certain way, which becomes a bit rigid and unflexible. And then that itself becomes a kind of dogma and prevents you from actually enjoying your life too, in a way.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And I think, the more I've kind of sat on these 3 years since the last time we talked, I feel like our talks are kind of like milestones of like the evolution of, but I think, I really felt like my generation of, young mothers, that I feel like I see a lot of my friends now in Mysore that have been teaching for a while, and now we have children, and it's like, and I see the different ways we've all gone, and the different way that like our relationship to practice has kind of moved in.
Yeah.
And personally, I think in what you just said, the thing that it's come down to for me is like to create enough space in my mind and in my heart to really connect with practice, like from the heart, versus like going through the motions or not going through the motions, but like to really reconsider and revisit that heart connection of just like, sorry, I bumped the mic. That
I told you not to do that.
I know, so bad. Keep your trusting. So that, this idea, this month at my shala here in Newburgh, we're talking about Shraddha and, this idea of faith and really dissecting it, and like, what is faith and how does it manifest, and, what does it look like in everyday life? And that can be on the mat, off the mat, or it could be both. There's so many ways of, how you relate to yourself, to others. But it's definitely been, these past 3 years, it's been not having a physical teacher. It's been really, that's been the main work, like to really continue to cultivate that Shraddha, that faith in practice, in the teachings, and in the evolution of being like a practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big shift when, for whatever reason, you don't have a physical teacher, and then where do you look to? What, is it a void that needs to be filled? I don't know. Is it a void? What do you look to? What do you go to? I mean, who's the ultimate teacher, right?
I think there's a certain level. It's not so much a void, but I think it's almost like a rite of passage, right? You've thought, as a young practitioner, you've thought that like the teacher was the thing that you were like dedicated to. And then you begin to see like the practice. And then you're like, is it the practice? Is this inside of me? What is it? Where does it live? And how do I connect? And so it's like this shedding of, or this evolution of the relationship. And I think I'm at that place where, where I'm being curious about guru and what is guru and parampara and how do we carry the parampara and then how do we be in these times and it's a lot of questions. It's a lot of like things to hold and think about and I think as a teacher to continue to question as we carry this lineage, right? Of like how do we keep adapting it and growing it and in our hearts and with our communities. Something that I've been kind of really dissecting.
It's interesting. It does bring up a lot of interesting questions. I was thinking about, our roles here as, let's call ourselves ethno-Europeans. We're, we're, we all went to India and to, I like this word excavate, and that has all these kind of colonial associations. And like archaeologists, from this ethno-European background, we went to India and it was almost like a different century and with a completely different financial structure. And so much so that our $10,000 a year that we're making made us feel like princes and princesses. We had so much wealth, and then we went there and we excavated as much information as we could. But if you think about it like an archaeologist, studying the ancient Mayans, or an archaeologist studying, you know, Persepolis and the Persian Empire, like how much can you really know about their day-to-day life? Like the vastness of ignorance that we have about, what Mayans did before they ate breakfast. Do they read a newspaper? Like, did they art? What did they? We have no idea. We can assume because they were human that they had a particular way. Maybe they were like us. Maybe they bitched at each other the way that Harmony and I do, just a way of saying good morning.
We mostly don't speak.
But like, there's probably this mostly don't. I don't like to talk. And so the vastness of what we don't know, of a civilization is it's profound. And you could take that same lens of the archaeologists excavating a culture and what do we know about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras really when they were writing them 3,000 years ago and what the intent was. You can take that same lens and apply it to your child. The vastness of your child, the vastness of your experience as a parent is taking that step into trying to explore what it means to be a parent to that unique child. There's no book for you to parent your child.
I really wish there was. Every day I think that. I'm like, is there not a manual for this?
For this particular,
like,
but this
where's
particular
Surya A?
child,
And, like Ekam and Dwe.
this particular child, what do you do with this child?
Right.
Because you go to the other parents, like, no, my kid doesn't do that. Like even our LG TV screen is different from the LG TV screen that's upstairs. Like it doesn't, like they need different manuals, and so, the enormity of the task that you have set for yourself to raise this child. I mean, you'd be better off having 9 more, so at least you just give up.
Fully. That's real surrender.
If 8 of them lived, you'd be happy. And if 6 of them, didn't become, cut purses and sneak thieves and street urchins, you'd be like, oh, good.
Right. I might die in that equation, though.
Yeah, you might not make it.
I imagine that you are very fertile, madam. She's laughing so much she can't speak.
Oh my goodness.
But that's an interesting point. Like, I think being a mother kind of evokes often, if, you're present to it, which is what we're talking about, that awakening of the heart.
Yeah.
And feeling into like, what's right in this situation? What do I need? What does, my son need or my child need? And bringing that same kind of awareness to our practice, I think is kind of key. And instead of it being for the teacher, right, having that external accountability, like I'm showing up so that I can get my gold star and be a good student. And then, as you were saying, like transferring that to the practice. Okay, well, now the practice is my taskmaster, right? Or I'm like showing up because I have to do this thing in order to be a good person,
Yeah.
right? And then to just letting it go.
Yeah.
I mean, like I'm just gonna live from the heart and be a good mother and be a good person because that's who I am. I'm like, fully
Yeah.
whole and complete without having to do all of this, without having to show up for someone, this external person. I'm showing up for, I guess you're still showing up for someone, but who needs you in a very different way. But then coming all the way full circle back to how do I show up for myself? And how do I tune into what my heart needs for me in this situation? And it's
I
beginning again in a way, right?
yeah. I had a student, like maybe a couple of months ago, ask me, what does your practice look like? And I feel like some students have this idea that I like have this crazy practice that they've maybe seen in the past. And I paused and I was like, what does my practice look like? And as I'm also running these teacher trainings, and it's like a big part of it is I begin with them and I talk to them about, creating this deep, intimate connection with yoga. Like,
Yeah.
what is it for you? What's made you be here now that you want to learn to share this? And really that's anything else I share in that teacher training doesn't really matter. I mean, to a certain degree, obviously it does, but but like, if they walk away having that understanding of why am I doing, like, why am I showing up to these practices? Why am I interested in this? So that if everything else falls away, that's always there, right? That
Yeah.
love, that connection, I like to call it intimacy or like communion with this body of knowledge that's been left for us. And I think, to your points of like the motherhood, I think, and I wanted to come on here to speak about this because I feel like there's a lot of this we live on Instagram a lot, I feel like. And I think a lot of the questions that I get, it's almost like there's a misperception of like where we are as teachers with our personal life with our motherhood. And, to me personally, it's been really, these past 3 years have been like almost like a death of self, a period of anger in between the death of self and the rebirth of just like deep anger and like, why did I do this? The fuck was I thinking, and then like at the same time paired with like this love and this like fear of like, to the point that Krishna Das, I asked a question about mortality and he was like, you should go to a therapist. So like, spiritual practice only gets you so far. And I thought about that a lot. And, it's like you thought you cared so much about yoga and then you have a child and all of a sudden it's like, you held this thing so like close to your heart and all of a sudden there's this human being and it's like taking over everything. And you're like, but wait, who am I if I don't have this other love, and like you have to find place for everything. And then in that, it's like, oh, and then where am I in relationship to all of this, even though you're there the whole time, right? But it's like, yeah, you also get lost even though you're there. And so it's like this, so there's the anger, then there's like the rebirth, and then you're like all comfortable being this new person. You think you've got it. And then it's like the grief hits you of like, fuck, like, I miss that person. Where did she go? And so then you have to kind of like settle it all. And I feel like this is where then the truth really arises, right? Of like, okay, let me really look at everything and see like what's important and how do I fit that in? And I feel like I've been so curious about this concept of faith, of shraddha, of just like and also of like, where does the strength behind that lie? And how do you keep cultivating that strength when you have like a million things pulling at you? Like, how do you hold it? How do you preserve it? How do you not let that flame like die out? Because it's so important also in the mothering, because if you lose it, then it's like, not only there's no manual, but also there's just nothing left, And so it's been really nice to, I have to thank John Gamble, because John walked into my shala, and, it was almost like as if Sharat would have walked in, right? It was like the lineage arrived, and it was like, I just felt like my heart just like got a breath. It was like, I just felt so nourished just by the presence of like someone that's been in the presence of all of you, all of us, and like to have that, because up here, Ashtanga is very new. And so it's like, it's been this, like, a lot of effort and a lot, I love my students, and they're so kind and full of love, but it's like, you're building it from scratch, and you guys know you've done this, and it was just so, I really feel like he was like a gift from the universe. And it's really, and I think that's what like really reset things into place. And so then then you have to really relook at everything, and like, how do you, because practice is not just asana. It's like, you've got your asana, you've got your, your reading, and you've got your chanting. It's just, it's just, you got to go to a cave.
Yes.
How do you
You could easily do 4 or 5 hours a day.
It can really only be done in a cave, actually.
Yeah,
That's the
truly.
That's the lesson. And so if you are not in a cave,
Yeah.
what
How do you,
what then do you edit out?
yeah, I don't know. When I was 3, I wanted to be a nun, and now I'm 38. I'm like, God damn, I want to be a nun. I just, I feel bad because, I got my child and I love him dearly. And a couple of months ago, he was like, well, it was maybe like September. He was like, no, mommy, you only love Hanuman. And I was like, ooh, how do I, ooh.
You're like, oh dear.
Was he telling you that you should only love Hanuman, or was he saying, I don't think you love me as much as Hanuman?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still, it's still a little bit unclear. It's
a
I'm
grammar
still
issue, right?
digesting it,
Because
and
he's
then,
still learning grammar.
yeah.
You only
Yeah.
study Hanuman.
Yeah.
Like, you only love Hanuman. It's very,
Yeah.
it's grammar.
It's complicated. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I know some yoga teachers, when their kids started to speak, some of the first words they said, some of their first sentences were, no yoga, daddy. No
Oh yeah,
yoga,
I've gotten
mommy.
that. I've gotten that. Yes.
And
So on New Year's, I posted about it because we went, and it was Christmas. It's Christmas Day.
Yeah.
We went for a walk, and I was, he was riding on his bike, and I just started doing some yoga on the cement with all my layers. And he comes over, he's like, ooh, I like your moves. Can you teach me some moves? And I was like, I almost died. I almost fell over to the ground and was like, yeah, I can show you some moves.
Yeah. It's like how to include, right? I mean, I think that's like, what's the expression underneath that is, I feel not included. I feel like your attention is being, diverted. And as especially young children, I mean, from 0 to 3, like all of your attachment, all of your self-worth, all of your unconscious understanding about the world is being developed. And that mostly comes from your mother. So as a mother, it's such a big job. And you really are doing a service to your child by keeping your attention there and making that your drishti. It's a gift. And it's 3 years out of your life. It's nothing.
Seems like a long
Seems
Seems
like a long time when you're listening.
I mean, even 5 years goes very
Yeah.
quickly, right? And so when you're in it, I remember someone always said, like, the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah.
Right. And to create that kind of foundation, to cultivate that for, your child as a mother is a privilege, is an honor to come in with that kind of conscious parenting. And then, like you say, there is another shift that starts to happen where it's like, okay, well, now I'm entering this new phase where I need to kind of come back into myself and into my own body again in a way that's just for me and not shared with another being, because this being has his own body or her own body, and they're entering a new phase too, right? And so it's kind of a beautiful dance and metamorphosis that happens, I think in these relationships that really, to me, it's the heart of the practice. It's like, yoga takes place in relationship. Yoga is the union. It's the relationship. It's in the conversation. It's in coming together. It's in this joining. And yeah, you can go to a cave and be as self-centered as you want, right? But
Totally centered on itself.
yeah, but
Only the self.
yeah, but that's not
Yeah, you don't learn how
necessarily
to-
going to
yeah.
help you in your practice. Do you know, like
Yeah.
periods of that, maybe for sure, I think are definitely helpful, but you have to still leave. You have to
Yeah.
still eat. You have to still interact with people, right? That's where it comes into scope, is like
Yeah.
how, I think I was just talking about this today in my More Than Asana group that I started. And so we were having a class, and I said, we mistaken the practice. We mistaken the goal of yoga as being something outside of ourselves. We think, if I do this much chanting and this much asana and this much pranayama and this much studying, and I learn these mantras and I sit for 5 hours, I'm going to get there. And there is better than here. And there I'm going to feel good and I'm going to be free. But there is no there.
Right.
It's always right here.
Yeah.
As Gertrude Stein said about Oakland, there is no there.
And so we have to, and the moment we can recognize that, the moment we can stop projecting out and go, oh, it's here, it's now. And I mean, that's the very first yoga sutra, right? Atta Yoga Anushasanam. Yoga is now. And then we stop going, oh, it's out there. It's somewhere in the future. It's somewhere after I do all of these things. It's like, no, actually, it's right here, right now. And it's exactly where you're saying it's in your heart.
I
You
think
just
the
go home.
the seer versus the seen, that whole relationship gets a little in the way of that. Here and there, just here and there.
Yeah.
But I hear that, and I think that's so beautifully said. And I think that, I want to be fully honest here, because I think, I feel like I'm on this path as a mother, as a yogi mother, as a mother who is in this path, because I don't know how many women have felt this way and how many women have spoken about it or not. But I do get a lot of emails and messages about this, because I've been very kind of, I've spoken a lot about it. And, for me, mothering did not come, like, when you explain it like that, I'm like, that's so beautiful. And how did I not think of that? I'm like, how did I not do that? And to a certain degree, I feel in these past 3 years, I did that to my best ability. But I think as a I'm not fully recovering addict, but to a certain degree, recovery, like, I had my share of like lack of self-worth, and therefore grabbing onto all the other external things to make up for that. And then my eating disorder and all these things. I think in this process of accepting and embodying all the things that you just said, there's all of that gets in the way. And really, like, if you're not fully attent to it the whole time, it can really begin to cover reality and change and cover reality, and therefore cover the essence of what we're doing here in practice, like what you just said, and so you have to really, for me, it's been like a constant inner battle of like, no, that's not the voice you're listening to. Your duty here and now is to be here with your child. It's not, going back to the shala and cleaning Ganesh or chanting, however many, it's like, it's this constant, like, pulling back and it's been a lot of effort. And I think I've done a good job at it, because my child is somewhat fine.
He's
He could be
lovely.
better, he definitely has anger and all the other things, toddler things. But now as he's in this like dad, like he's awoken to daddy. Daddy is like
Yeah.
become a thing.
Yeah.
And so, like, of course, it's a thing unless you get up at 5 a.m. to go sneak out early to go practice. And then he wakes up and daddy is no longer a thing. But other than that, but I think that, yeah, it's, I think it's important to all be aware of like what our journey has been with practice, whatever practice may be for anybody, and to know how that can get in the way and how to keep sight of it and how to keep it like a companion that you can kind of pet and be like, it's okay, and um yeah, I love what you said, and I think that's the experience that I was hoping to have, and I think it's been a little bit more rocky for me to embrace and to share the space and to let go of the idea of what. And it's been the most beautiful gift, and it's for sure. But yeah.
I was a couple of things that you mentioned or referred to make me wonder about the nature of the crisis that you're experiencing, and I wonder if there's so much of it is wrapped up in identity and
Yeah.
an overextension of your effort to reach a particular kind of identity. I was thinking of you mentioned Shraddha and faith, and it reminded me of Shraddha's Instagram page, Sharat's daughter, and she's clearly in a space now where she's, demonstrating value to the public as a highly desirable female. That's where she's at, right?
I missed that.
And you should check out her Instagram page, Shraddha, I think is what it's called. And so, I'm very different from like the little 3 or 4-year-old girl that I knew who was like interested in dancing, but like this is a different kind of dance, I suppose. And so then, say she accomplishes her mission, which is to attract a
Mate.
highly functional mate, high powered, high achieving, wealthy mate. I think that's the dream. And then she has a child. She has multiple children because she's done all the work to demonstrate her fertility. Then she should then produce
right.
multiple children with
Yeah.
for the effort. And then what happens to her? She is a mother. She's no longer the same person who was demonstrating value for a mate. She's now a maternal Maria figure caring for the child that has been produced. She's now caring for the Christ rather than attracting um, a hero.
Mm.
And so it's interesting. Like you said, well, I miss who I was, and I think that it's so much to do with like the desiring to feel cool. Like I want to be cool, and I want to look cool. I want to be cool, but like I'm expressing milk through my T-shirt, and like it's not cool. It's like, and
That's
so
not cool.
who said they were doing that? But like I want to be cool, and so I think we all do want to be cool because I think cool is also so wrapped up in desire and attraction and feeling that people will desire and attract me if I'm cool. And I think it's almost a kind of pernicious uh, disease that permeates our Western society is the desire to be cool as a 60-year-old or 55-year-old middle class mom or dad. I have a dad bod now. I'm not cool. And I'm not going to be any more cool than I was, So that that is an overextension of the of desire to want to be more than you are. And the whole point of practice, I thought, was to be comfortable with observation and contemplation of circumstances as they are.
You have to get there.
You have to get there. and it's you were talking about, you become what your mother, you become a mother in the same way that your mother's mothered you. And I think maybe you didn't say that exactly, but it's like so much of what we do is wrapped up in how our parents raised us and our culture. And it's trying to not be who Bibi, who I think you're Italian,
Yeah.
to not be Bibi the Italian, or Harmony the Canadian, or Russell the schmuck. That trying to not be that person and through practice is as difficult as trying to change the way the hair grows out of your head. For me to try and grow straight hair, for Harmony to grow curly hair, for you to grow curly hair, it's that difficult of a job. It deserves sympathy and compassion.
Truly.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you're both kind of speaking to, and I think what happens all along our path at different stages, male or female. I mean, I think it happens for women when we have children, but it happens again and it happens again and again. And it keeps happening because we keep identifying, right? We have this attachment and we keep identifying with this attachment. And yeah, it's not, I mean, it's easy to talk about, right? It's easy to be like, just be in the now and connect to your heart and, like show up for yourself and show up for people around you. And like inside, there's also a 3-year-old having a temper tantrum saying, I want to, have 2.5 hours to do my fucking practice.
Right.
Leave me the fuck alone. Right?
That's always there. Yeah.
And so
Heaps of kindness and compassion and empathy on just everywhere.
And I'm like, whoa, I just wanted to cuddle, in quotation marks. Jesus.
So it's again like kind of being able to understand that there's also that like 3-year-old inside of us that's having this attachment issue to what this little person wants, and like okay, I understand you want 2.5 hours to do your practice, but like that's not possible today, sweetheart.
Yeah.
So how about 10 minutes?
Yeah.
How can you bring your practice into other aspects of your life, right? I mean, we have to, there's a lot of talk of this in personal development spaces, but like reparent ourselves in some ways.
Yeah. I was going to say that next, the reparenting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because especially, a lot of us didn't have, the parents who were fully conscious, functional human beings, and they were doing the best they could for sure. But but there was maybe some gaps there that created for ourselves, places where we didn't feel loved or feel worthy, right? And the whole practice of yoga is to try and help us figure out, like, actually, you're whole, you're complete. Like, you don't need to, lift, do 220 push-ups a day in order to be good enough.
I think that's a good, talk about goals. That's a good, like post-it to have every morning. The things you don't need to do so that you can really be just
and then
be.
And then, like you say, it's such a delicate balance between like what you don't need to do, but what do you need to do?
Right.
Because there is something also that you do need to do. Because if you don't do anything, you might start to feel a little bit depressed.
And now we're right there, right? We're right there between the hammer and the nail. We're between the 0 and the 1.
But that's the hardest, right? To like live right in between the 0 and the 1. Just enough.
Yeah.
That's like the real, And I think,
so
the paying attention, or however one of the two of you framed it, of being in the moment. I think that's been another huge thing that if you didn't learn in practice on the mat, whatever format, you really learn in parenting of like how many times you fall out of being in the moment. Most of the time you're not in the moment, and therefore it's hard because you're just get the shoes on because you're going there, and then in practice you start to really notice like, I've been checked out for, however many years on the mat, and like minus, the little flares of like that practice where you're just like one. And so I'm reading this book by Sylvia Bornstein called Pay Attention for Goodness Sake.
Yeah.
If you on the Paramitas. And I'm going to say it wrong because I'm terrible at retelling things. But something about the Buddha saying that being awake is like, what breath you were on when you fell asleep, and fell asleep meaning not obviously just at night, just when you're not here. And like when you come back, what breath you left on. And I woke up actually at 3 a.m. the other night, 3:30, thinking that. I was like, how could I remember what? And I was like, oh, now maybe I can remember. And I was trying to like catch myself, but it's like stuff like that. That's just like random, but also so simple and so accessible, and yet so profoundly hard. And, how many times when I think about that, I'm like, do I ever know what breath I'm on? Like,
are we supposed to count all the time every day?
Are we like, except for when I'm teaching lead, and like even then, do I really know? Akam inhale, am I here? Is
that another thing we should be doing?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what's the next one?
Speaking to interesting thing too that comes up also, I think, especially for mothers, is in our minds, there's this ideal, like, perfect mother who's like always patient and always kind and always attentive and always like knows the right thing to say. Like, right? There's this, and we're like trying to live into this ideal. And like 98% of the time, we're not that. And that's perfectly okay also, because the ideal is, it's like, again, it's another projection of perfection.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, well, I'm going to be a good mother when I'm attentive all the time and like know the perfect thing to say, and I don't lose my shit, and I'm, not having feelings of regret or guilt or shame or whatever is coming up, right?
Nothing pleases me more when Harmony loses her shit on our son. Just like gives me a warm feeling inside. I mean,
oh, that's not.
It's not just me. He deserves this. Yes.
But I think in virtue of being a practitioner, you've cultivated that awareness already, right? And the practice.
Sometimes that's a curse almost.
Yeah, because you see how far you are from it. But that's the beautiful thing, right? Is that you have that awareness, which makes you like 100 times more prepared to show up in a present kind of way than someone that doesn't even have the awareness at all, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just I think it's something we do to ourselves all the time. I mean, maybe as women, maybe as mothers, is constantly feeling like we're never good enough to, I'm not a good enough mother. I'm not a good enough partner. I'm not a good enough house cleaner. I'm not a good enough chef. I'm not like feeding my kids the best food, right? There's this massive mom guilt that shows up, I think, when you have a child for some reason. I don't know if it's brain chemistry or what, but it just feels like you're never doing enough of the right stuff. And then you throw on the yoga practice guilt on top of that. And then you're like, oh, and I'm not a good enough practitioner.
Right.
I'm not practicing enough. And I let my 3rd series go. And I let my 2nd series go.
Right.
And I let most of primary series go. And then you're like, well, I'm just failing at everything.
So nice. I love this. This is exactly where I wanted to get to, because I think that we need to embrace more that imperfection and to I just started this Shantala. Have you guys heard of her? She does Veda studies. She's
I have heard of her. Mm-hmm.
So I just embarked on this year-long Vedic chanting training of sorts, and
you didn't have enough to do. Oh, I
Well,
see.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Because whenever you don't have
Mm.
time, you have to add things in
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
there's a sense of like, I'm okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, of course. And I'm really good at that. And there's this talk about perfection. There's all these rules, right? Like you can't drink, you have to be a vegetarian.
Yeah.
The intonation, the swaras and like the 3 notes, how you have to perfectly hit them. And there's so many opportunities
You have to
to fail.
drink, or wait a second. I'm sorry.
Can't drink alcohol.
Or
Yeah, you can't
you have
drink
to be
alcohol.
vegetarian in order to fucking chant
Yeah, if you want to
Sanskrit.
chant the Vedas properly.
The Vedas, yes. So that you can clearly be a clear vessel.
Conduit.
That is
Um,
bananas.
and it's it's a little bit sad because I had just re-embarked on my enjoying wine career. I just had, like after many years of not drinking, I I reawoke to like,
Oh.
wine, and then I was like,
So-
well, now I'm gonna embark again.
This is the moment where your hobbies are in conflict. And
Yes.
it
Lucky
now
that-
requires editing again.
Again, we're editing.
we
More
always have to
editing.
challenge ourselves, right? So
No, we don't. Sometimes you can just not do so much.
yes, next lifetime.
Maybe
But
next decade.
it's just yes.
Man.
But it's just so interesting, because I feel like the perfectionism and this idea of like, well, there's a perfectionism, but then there's also this idea of like really, really taking time to learn something really well, and to really care, which I feel like since we are in the topic of motherhood as well, it's just like, it's such a given to, you want to do things well for your child, you want to care so well, but like also the care that I think for me had gotten lost to preserve a space where it's not about anybody other than something that I'm learning, and to like bow down to that and the humility that comes with that, which I feel like it reminds you, it just ignites a little flame in you to be better as a human being. For me, it's like that opposite way, like it's easy to get lost in like just getting a little too carried away by life.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, the perfectionism and the failing. It's I really enjoy getting really intimate with that and like what that brings up and how to navigate it. And I think Ashtanga yoga specifically for me has been such a kind, and which I feel like for a lot of people it's the opposite experience. For me, it's been such a kind receiving container where like you can, like, failure is actually really nice because you just have endless opportunities every day to like begin again. And like,
Sure.
and most of the time no one's really looking at you. So you get like,
Yeah. Most of the time, no one's
Very
looking at you.
intimate opportunity for sadomasochism. That's right.
yes, that too. But then eventually you figure your way out of it because it's just like every day. And then one day you're like, you gotta stop, and like you just, that's enough, and that's such a beautiful learning.
I agree that you just have to stop. I was thinking about this last night. Harmony and I were watching a show called Top Chef. And
Yes, I've heard of this.
one of the cooks, a very hardworking young chef, she said she was given this task to make a dish that resembled a painting. The painting was very expressive, very colorful, and wild, and the person that she was paired with was a wild, crazy Mexicana artista, and it was just like, wow, that's very different than who she is. But she made a beautiful crafted dish, absolutely exquisite. And the criticism of the dish and why she didn't win the challenge was that it wasn't expressive and wild enough. She hadn't let herself go. And the next time we see her talking and, she comes to the camera and says, I just need to work harder. I just need to be better next time. I was like, no, that's not the lesson. No, that you are not hearing the critique. You're not hearing the critique. And it's not working harder. It was letting go and stepping back. And I feel like there's something there for you.
Thank you, Russell. Yes, my
There's
whole
something there
lifetime.
for all of us.
Just
Okay.
fucking stop.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll keep a little note for next life.
And actually, I'm talking to my wife here. Just between the three of us and no one else listening, we can edit that out. I'm really talking to Harmony when she says, I'm taking another course.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, no, you need to fucking stop. Stop it. Stop it. You complain all fucking day about not having enough time, about not being able to do your 2.5 hour practice, about not being able to do this. And
Yeah.
you're exhausted all the time. And it's 8
Yep.
o'clock and you won't stop working to come have dinner with me so we can watch Top Chef. And I'm like, fucking stop it. Stop it. And it's like, yeah, I know I'm a lazy
Yeah.
fuck and I need to do more, but it's like,
Yeah.
there's got to be a balance here.
Well, you're a Taurus, right? You guys just
I
know
am
how
a
to do
Taurus.
this. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
they know
beautiful,
how to just like relax.
beautiful
I
art.
have a beautiful home that I'm loath to leave. I like having lots of women around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my son is a Taurus. I'm already beginning to see, he's just, he just wants to lounge and eat. And, the other day
Yes.
I took him skiing because there was like a little snow and he was like,
When-
I'm going to be a professional skier, mommy. And then after 2 minutes, he's like, can we go have some crackers?
Let's go have some
Have a
Yeah.
snack.
I sit at my desk and I'm working and I say, I need a break. I go lie down and
Yeah.
I just, eat and watch TV. Like that's,
Yeah.
that's my
Watch
break.
TV in the middle of the day.
And it's,
But you
I
do
know,
lie
know.
down a lot.
It's like a little minis TV.
Yeah, it's
like a little-
called a phone.
It's a little fits in your hand. And,
Yeah, it's comfortable like that. I really like to be uncomfortable. Not like in my surroundings, just I like to complicate my life as a practice. When I start to say like, like I didn't create it, but we did this 200-hour manual and like, this is the second year. And I was sitting there, I was like, I feel like we should do a different one next year. And so it's like, I had just had the thought before that of like, oh, this year with my teachers, we were like, this year feels like we're in a groove, like we've got it down, and then a couple of weeks later, I was like, maybe next year we should do like an advanced training where we talk about like the subtle body. And then, and like, what can I study this year that I can then like complicate my life trying to really like understand it and then like chew it up and explain it to someone else.
I think like the heart of what
alive,
Yeah, I think the heart of what you're talking about though, like a lot of this comes down to what we value, right? And I think you're like me and I really value growth. I love growth.
Yes.
Growth makes me so excited and so
excited.
happy.
This is a retraction period for you. We're now retracting.
And so and so I think you're the same, right? Is that like when you're learning something new, and you know what? Maybe it's asana. Like for a while, probably it was the asana. You felt like you're growing. And now you're for me, I'm in a space where I'm like, I don't really need to grow my asanas anymore. It'd just be great to kind of, keep up with some of the ones that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's so freeing to give yourself that.
Yeah, but I still love growth.
But then you have that. Yes, exactly.
And so you still are seeking out, well, like, how can I grow and have that same connection to that value where I feel like I'm feeding my soul in some way.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's just for you. It's not, it doesn't belong to anyone else. It's just like your time to like learn something and have that beautiful experience of like growing and changing and becoming a different person. And I think that, to honor that is to honor yourself. And so however that shows up, maybe that shows up for some people like cooking or,
or mothering,
writing music or mothering. And I mean, as a mother, it kind of, that kind of is your growth edge
Right.
for many years.
Yeah.
Kind of get in the groove. I mean, it still kind of is a growth edge, but you kind of, you figure your kid out a little bit. So it's not as challenging as it once was.
Yeah.
And they also kind of take on different personalities and habits. And it's nice to just feel like, oh, I'm evolving as a human being. And I think that it's really healthy to have that and have whatever shape or form that takes.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that you love, that you enjoy, that, really
And I
feel
think also
good.
just, at least for me at this specific juncture in life, it's also like the continued like seeking of like, what is it that we're doing? Like
Yeah.
what is this yoga? And like there's so many layers to it as you grow into it and through it and whatever, of like, yeah, if it's not the asana, how do I keep connection to that? And how do I truthfully show up as a teacher, like being a student all the time? And
Yeah.
especially when you are by yourself, how do you keep that? How do you keep cultivating that in a way that's not, the crazy being that is attached, that needs to like reach a place or needs to always be busy, but also not the opposite of that. And so
Yeah.
I think, I think it's I would love to see more of these conversations between other practitioners of my generation, of like, we've gotten here and like, what are we doing to keep our roots and to keep growing in an honest way and to keep all the duties that we have, and yet, keep the faith alive, keep the heart connection to these practices alive. And to a certain degree, another thing that I've been really aware of is that some of our teachers or my teachers anyway, are aging. They're becoming like senior teachers. And it like makes you think like, how who's gonna hold these practices, and what, at some point we're gonna be the old ones, and that's really intimidating. And how do you keep learning to, especially having like a yoga school, like how do you pay homage to yoga fairly? And because there is so much of not that. So how do you I feel that duty very strongly, almost more strongly than motherhood, because motherhood, you have a little bit more leeway. You can, no one's watching you and you're but I feel a lot of reverence to being a shala owner, and um especially in a place where it's fairly new. How do you build a sangha, and like how do you feed it, and how do you nourish it, and how do you, all these things,
Yeah.
it's very dear to my heart.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I mean, I think you're also just doing all the right thing because you're listening to
Yeah,
your heart, you're listening to
heart.
your
Yeah,
intuition, and what feeds you is going to feed your
yeah,
community.
yeah.
And,
But these conversations are so important.
yeah, when you're showing up authentically,
Yeah.
then that transmits so much. I'm so curious, what do people, I mean, you've kind of spoke a little bit about this, but like other mothers, what are the things that they're writing to you about? What is their struggle?
Well, I think a lot of it is, how do you make time to do all the things you do? And, a lot of it is like, my life is a fucking mess. And like, I I I had to really, like, I guess the most important message for me, for like the general, and I find myself like watching other friends like having a perfect practice or doing all these things, and like for me it's really like what I think Russell was saying, or you both were saying, of just like, what is true to my heart. And
Mm.
I don't need to be anything other than that. I don't need to be a cool person. I never was a cool person anyway. And I don't need to be anything other than really be here for this child and for my in-person community.
Yeah.
And also make sure that I'm not giving out some sort of image of like this highly achieved person, because like my relationship was falling apart for a long time. And, I'm figuring out motherhood, and, practice is not what it was in the movie that I was in, the yoga, whatever, the architect. Someone came up to me with like, you're so effortless and like air. And I was like, let's correct that sentence. I am not. I
Right.
was,
Yeah.
and that's okay. But like, there was that struggle of like hearing that, and then that part like awakening and being like, hold on, what's happening here? We got to work to get back to that. And like, no, this is where you are now. And that was part of the journey. And I think we need to hear that more, that kindness towards oneself, of like, that was awesome. But it's also awesome that it's not still only that, because that would be profoundly sad. you know, like, you would be doing a very wrong yoga if that's where you got stuck. And so it's just, it's almost like we have to mother ourselves. And I say, when I say we, I mean, like, I'm 38 and I feel like as I get to 40 and I look back at myself and I look at my friends, like what you just said, like, it's okay where you are. And it doesn't need to be any particular thing. It's just what is important to your heart. And if you feel a deep reverence for this practice, what can it look like for you? And so for me right now, I'm in a phase where, I feel a renewed interest in like getting back to my physical practice. And it's definitely not what it was, but like a little more Agni and like, let me complete the Surya A, like, and let me stay with my eyes on my nose and see if I get a little clarity. When I go downstairs, maybe I won't yell, like, not that I'm yelling all, you know what I mean? Like when my partner leaves his shoes in the bathroom instead of, like if I held my drishti really, would I have a little more space, So just little experiments like that of like, there has to, for the way I am anyway. And I think there's a lot of people that are that way. There has to be a container and a container that is separate from all the other things. And whether that's like, I have a space in my house where like I go and I have to like every 3 weeks, I have to make the rule, like this can't go in that space, And so like there has to be, in order for everything else to survive. And the moment that gets washed away, everything else starts to, and that's just my limitation as a human being. I admire the people that don't have to do that. And I hope one day to get there. But for now, that's like important. And I see when that's not there, in whatever format it is, everything begins to kind of get messy and gunky. And there's a lack of being able to really see. And that's not nice. It's not a nice way to live.
It's really, I think, interesting. It sounds so much like you're in a period of life that, though with some anxiety, is very much in a Krishna consciousness or a Vishnu consciousness of preservation of community, preservation of self and relationship and family, and all these things require an enormous amount of bureaucracy to make sure concentration that they get done. You have to keep records. You have to have insurance. You need your shots. All these things go. All these things start to add when you need new tires. If you're going to actually preserve society, then all these things have to get done. And if they don't get done, it is disaster. But this is, I remember Narasimha saying to us, like, this is the value that the artist, or this is the value of the yogi that they bring to society, is the little flag that's saying disaster is okay. We're going to be okay in disaster. Shiva consciousness and the Shaivites are there to tell you that everything will fall apart. The civilization will collapse. The planet will fall into the sun.
Your body will age.
Your body will age. You will not be cool when you are, suffering with your diabetes.
And everything's still going to be okay.
And everything's going to be okay.
It's okay. We can do this whole thing again. We can come right out of the ocean again. Do the whole thing over again. And if it takes another 4 billion years to do it, got a little flag, Krishna will come back and it will be cool. Nice. Everything will be nice again. But it's so hard in the moment when you were like filling out a form at the DMV and you're like, to school to pick up my kid. This is not, ma'am, we need this form right now. And it's like, but like, it's like in the moment trying to understand that it is okay while we do the best that we can.
But
I think, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think what you're speaking to is really important, is like all this maintenance and concentration and energy. You have to also connect into your energy source somehow, like you're saying, whether that's the fire of the asana, or whether it's more of like the nourishing water of chanting or meditation, or the air of the pranayama, like however you're feeding your spirit, you need to feed yourself.
Yeah.
If you're going to have the energy and the ability and the concentration to sustain and maintain all of the different people and systems and structures and communities that are in your world, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So my partner's calling. Yeah, and I thought of something while you were talking, Russell, of a student of mine this morning. Actually, she's learning. She's doing Marichas at SC, and she goes, "Yeah, I was like, are you okay?" Because she was making, and she was, "Yeah, I just have a really hard time breathing in this posture." And I was like, "Yeah." And then I sat with that, and I was like, this is the essence of the practice. We learn to be okay with the discomfort of it all, and like to breathe. And I said something like that to her, and I don't know if I kind of mumbled it. I don't know if it really landed, but but that's really it. You funkify yourself, and I think I always thought that people that don't need to do the more advanced practices, they're legit people. Like I feel like the further you have to get, the more fucked up you are. You just gotta keep doing more fucked up things to get yourself out of the way. And eventually one day you're like, oh my God, Surya A. Oh.
Yeah.
Maya Heiss actually told me that. I think that was the first person who ever told me that. It was my first trip, and she was there, and she's working on her bananas practice, and she was like, "Yeah, actually, it's not a gift. That's how many postures I had to do to be able to feel something.
Yeah.
Whereas if you feel it right away, right in Surya Namaskar, that's the gift.
Yeah.
But then you're really learning to endure suffering with your breath as a practice for when actual life hits you in the ass.
Yeah. Isn't that would be nice.
Mm.
That's
really nice.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right? Yeah, like you said, sitting with discomfort and finding that space of peace.
Yeah.
Even if you can barely breathe.
Yeah.
But like being okay with like, I can barely breathe here, and this
Yeah.
feels really comfortable or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna stay here and observe it and notice and be with it.
All of these things will pass.
What's the word? Swaha.
Swaha. So be it. Beautiful. Well, this was so good. I think it's a really valuable conversation to have, like you're saying, because I know it's so hard. And I think there's a sense that like you're going to get your life back as a mom, and you kind of do, but like you kind of don't. And it kind of just keeps changing because, just as you get your life back, your body's going to fall apart.
Right.
And so,
but also once you love that way, it's like,
yeah.
you're at the same time, you're so bound to some degree, and yet so there's both, right? You're so bound, and there's so much freedom in that love, but also so bound.
I think that's
You're also bound to Bibi. You're just as bound to being her.
Yeah.
And it's also, there's love there, but it's also like, oh, I'm sort of tired of being Russell, I can tell you. It's starting to drag on. Like I'm 48 and I'm starting to like, this is really taking a long time. I thought that we'd be over by now.
Bob Thurman is 82. I was just at a retreat with him at Menla.
Bob.
And he said, I really thought I'd reach enlightenment by now. I'm so embarrassed that I haven't. Here I am, it's like.
He's always going on about that. I studied with him 20 years ago. He said the same
Wild
shit.
man.
I've only got one eye, and I'm not enlightened, and I'm not the Buddha.
Yeah.
God damn it, Bob. None of us are.
Just need to meditate on shunyata. Speaking of Bob Thurman,
And the Heart
Yes.
Sutra, that was the
You
last
should
thing
know
I
that.
studied with Bob was
We should get Diamond Sutra.
the Heart Sutra, and emptiness is form and form is
Emptiness.
emptiness, and this body is empty, and our
You know,
mind is
Indy asked
empty.
me the other day, he's like, what is zero, mommy? And I was like, no, we're not going there. I
What
am not
is
prepared for this
zero?
conversation.
What is
That's
zero?
Yeah,
amazing.
he's asked me what is zero.
Wow.
And then he's asked me, am I God?
Yes.
Mommy, am I God? And
Yes.
two questions that, you know,
There's this
A little
Yeah.
there's this
guru.
wonderful video of
Yeah.
Andrew's son as a toddler, Andrew Hillam's son as a toddler,
Mhm.
4-year-old. It's Narayana. Narayana in the back seat is like, everything is Brahma.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, what have we done to our children?
Amazing.
Unfortunately, I have to run.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't. Maybe the
Yes.
two of you want to
You
talk
gotta go
the
rest.
I think
Maitreya,
I think you're
Virya, but you guys keep going. I have to take off, but
Yeah.
love you dearly.
Thank
I hope
you.
that this crisis
this
eases
crisis.
for you, and my best to your
Thank
husband.
you.
I like him. He's nice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he's nice. Right.
so I hope that works out. Okay.
Thank you, my dear. It's always a pleasure to see you.
It was really wonderful to have you on the
Yes.
podcast, baby.
Yeah. Thank you, Harmony. You're always such an inspiration, and it's lovely to connect.
Yeah. No, it's a real pleasure, and I'm so glad that we had this conversation, and hopefully it was inspiring for the other women
Yeah.
and men. Hopefully some men too. Yeah, I mean, identity is tricky, right? We all have this personality that we're very attached to, and we catch glimpses, I think, of reality that we're not this personality, that we're not this body, that we're not this mind. We have these moments of zero, but then we're like right back in the mess.
Yep.
I think mostly our meditations, like the practice, right? Is like learning to just be in the mess of it.
Yeah.
Like be okay with it just being messy and imperfect. And
That's the dream.
yeah. But we get a lot of practice. So
Yes.
that's good. And practice helps.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel, I'll just say one more thing, which is at the end of one of these Krishna Das retreats,
Yeah.
I was like, it's so nice to be here. Just like when you go to Mysore, it's like you're in this bubble, where it's so easy to not to not have all the things, all the klesha stuff. And then you come home and it's like attachment, the feet, all the things just arrive, and it's, I think especially, with children there, it's hard to parent in a way that those things are not present. And that's a practice in and of itself.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It was
Thank
so
you.
nice.
So good
We
to
will
see you and talk
Connect
to you.
again.
Didn't you just love that conversation? There's so many goodies in there, so many beautiful takeaways. And if you're ready to move your practice beyond asana to that deeper level, to that soul level, to that spiritual level, then it's time for you to embark upon a pranayama practice. Developing a regular, consistent, daily pranayama practice will change your connection not only to your body and to your bandhas, your energetic locks inside, but it will also regulate your nervous system. You'll start to feel more relaxed, more peaceful, and at ease so you can enjoy your life again. It's going to improve your physical health. It's going to increase your immune system and create emotional stability in your life so that you're better able to handle life's daily stressors. It will also cleanse and purify your body and your subtle energy body, so you'll feel a greater sense of freedom. You might even notice that you become more flexible in your physical body as well as in your approach to life. It's time to create more clarity, more space in your mind so that you can think in a very clear and concise way, focus more easily, make those connections with people in your life, be present when you're relating to people and feel an increased sense of well-being. I would love for you to do all of these beautiful things with me inside Ancient Breathing 2.0. We are getting started next week. Our first class is on April 14th, and this pranayama practice will just change your life. So if you're ready to take your yoga practice to the next level, to go deeper, to truly develop a spiritual connection with yourself, with your higher power, God, whatever you conceive that to be, this practice will help you get there. It's the next step towards enlightenment, towards meditation, to deepening that inner connection and being with your body, to feeling embodied and really transforming some of those unconscious patterns and tendencies and blocks. I can't wait to work with you inside Ancient Breathing. It's time for you to transform your spiritual practice, your self-care routine, and really enhance your life in all these ways. It's amazing. I'm so thrilled to have this course and this program. It's a 6-week program and offer this opportunity to you because it's beyond worth it. It's so worth it to invest in yourself, invest in your health, invest in a practice that you can do on your own for the rest of your life, anywhere, anytime, that will immediately help you to connect more deeply and regulate your nervous system in a way that changes not only how you interpret and act in the world, but who you are in the world. It's so powerful. So come on in and join me in Ancient Breathing 2.0. Find all the links in my bio. Send me a DM. I'd love to connect with you or answer any questions you might have. You can find me on Instagram at Harmony Slater Official or on Instagram at Finding Harmony Podcast. I look forward to connecting with you there. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony Podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.